Ian Fleming. And let me set up a chat so we can discuss this as I read part of it. I'll read it in its entirety. It's only, I think, 111 pages. I'm not going to read it all in one setting, of course. But 111 pages is generous considering some of the pages are full page art. But from what I know of this, Fleming wrote this for his son, Caspar, who I believe, I have to get the full story. Caspar, his son, and Fleming himself died when he was rather young. I think he was 56. He had a heart attack and died in his mid-50s. He was a chain smoker and a heavy drinker, so obviously not a very healthy guy. But Ian Fleming died in Ian Fleming, I think he died in the mid-60s. Yeah, 64. So his son would have been like 11 or 12 years old. He had written this book for his son. And after his untimely death at the age of 56 in 1964, his son had a pretty rough go of it. Obviously, I'm sure his dad's death affected him. But his son became a drug addict and I think an archaeologist or Egyptologist, something like that. But he attempted to commit suicide several times, and I think at the age of 23, Caspar Fleming killed himself. Anyway, this book was for him, written, and I'm not sure when it was written. Was it written before his death? No, it was published in parts, I believe. Let's see when it was published. I guess I could just open the book and see, but there's probably so many different editions of the book. Originally published in October of 64, so is that before or after his death? Oh, so it was published after his death. But I believe it was serialized before. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, here's the book. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang by Ian Fleming, obviously the author of the James Bond novels. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang went the great car's exhaust, and the big green Paragon Panther roared to life. Let me open this chat. So I see someone's leaving a message right now. Hello, Brobs. Let's see who's here. Is it Christian, the name? Oh, my name's Christian, bruv. Okay, the chat is pulling up. And I don't see the chat. It's pulling up, though. Let me turn off this thing. Hi, is all Christian said. What's up, Christian? I'm reading this book. It was written for Ian Fleming's son before Fleming's death in 65. Published afterwards, and then his son committed suicide, so it's kind of a bittersweet book. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang went the great car's exhaust, and the big green Paragon Panther roared to life. The Pot family knew that their car was no ordinary car. The twins, Jeremy and Jemima, had noticed that right off. Her license plate read Gen 2, and that could be read Genie by knowing people. There was something magical about her, too. The Potts found that out soon enough. She could be an airplane or a boat when she had a mind to. So the Potts took a sea voyage from their English home and by chance found a gangster's hidden cave. But the cave belonged to an international mobster. Could the Potts escape the clutches of Joe the Monster and his gang? Their only hope, their only ally was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and she was just a car. Or was she? Was she? Hello, Brobs. Illustrated by John Birmingham, Random House. I believe this is a first edition, although it's in deplorable shape. Dedication. These stories are affectionately dedicated to the memory of the original Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, built in 1920 by Count Zoborowski on his estate near Canterbury. She had a pre-1914 war chain-drive 75 horsepower Mercedes chassis in which she was installed a six-cylinder Maybach aero engine, the military type used by the Germans in their Zeppelins. 4 vertical overhead valves per cylinder were operated by exposed push rods and rockers from a camshaft on each side of the crankcase, and 2 Zenith carburetors were attached, one at each end of a long induction pipe. She had a gray steel body with an immense polished hood, 8 feet in length, and weighed over 5 tons. In 1921, she won the 100-mile-per-hour short handicap at Brooklands at 101 miles per hour, and in 1922, again at Brooklands, the lightning short handicap. But in that year, she was involved in an accident, and the Count never raced her again. That's sad, buddy. A note for the observant reader. This story takes place in England, and as in England, they use English money. Peculiarly enough, the American reader will need to know a little, though not a lot, about English currency. So a pound is worth approximately $2.80, and a shilling is worth 14 cents. And if your arithmetic is good enough, you should be able to figure out exactly how much things cost in this story. Obviously, this is 1960s terms. 1. Most motor cars are I'm already botching it. 1. Most motor cars are conglomerations. This is a long word for bundles of steel and wire and rubber and plastic and electricity and oil and gasoline and water and the toffee papers you pushed down the crack in the back seat last Sunday. Smoke comes out of the back of them, and horn squawks out of the front. And they have white lights like big eyes in front and red lights behind, and that is about that. Just motor cars, tin boxes on wheels for running about in. But some motor cars, mine for instance, and perhaps yours, are different. If you get to like them and understand them, if you are kind to them and don't scratch their paint or bang their doors, if you fill them up and pump them up when they need it, if you keep them clean and polished and out of the rain and snow as much as possible, you may find that they become almost like persons, more than just ordinary persons, magical persons. You don't believe me? All right, then. You just read about this car I'm going to tell you about. I believe you can guess its name already, her name, I should say, and then see if you don't agree with me. All motor cars aren't just conglomerations of machinery and fuel. Some are. Once upon a time, there was a family called Pot. There was the father who had been in the Royal Navy, Commander Caractacus Pot. Caractacus? I don't know. Caractacus Pot. You may think that Caractacus sounds quite a funny name, but in fact, the original Caractacus was the British chieftain who was a sort of Robin Hood in AD 48 and led an English army against the Roman invaders. I expect since then there have been plenty of other Caractatuses, but I don't know anything about them. Then there was the mother, Mimsy Pot, and a pair of 8-year-old twins, Jeremy, who was a black-haired boy, and Jemima, who was a golden-haired girl, and they lived in a wood beside a big lake with an island in the middle. On the other side of the lake, M20, the big turnpike along the Dover Road, swept away towards the sea. So they had the best of both worlds, lovely woods for catching beetles and finding birds' eggs, with the lake for newts and tadpoles, and a fine big road close by so that they could go off and see the world if they wanted to. Well, almost that is. But the truth of the matter was that they hadn't got enough money between them to buy a car. All the money they had went to necessities, food and heat and light and clothes and all those boring things that one doesn't really notice, but families have to have. There was only a little left over for birthday and Easter and Christmas presents and occasional surprise outings, the things that really matter. But the Pots were a happy family who all enjoyed their lives, and since they were not in the least sorry for themselves, or sorry that they had no motor car to go whirling about in, we need not be sorry for them either. Now, Commander Cracketus Pot was an explorer and an inventor, and that may have been the reason why the Pot family was not very rich. Exploring places and inventing things can be very exciting indeed, but it is only very seldom that in your explorations you discover a really rare butterfly or animal or insect or mineral or plant that people will pay money to see. And practically never you discover real treasures like in books, gold bars and diamonds and jewels in an old oak chest. As for inventions, much the same trouble apply. People all over the world in America, Russia, China, Japan, let alone England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland, are inventing or trying to invent things all the time. Every kind of thing from rockets that fly to the moon to ways of making India rubber balls bounce higher. Everything is being invented or improved all the time by somebody somewhere. Whether by teams of scientists in huge factories and laboratories, or is that laboratories, or by the lonely men sitting and just thinking in tiny workshops without many tools. Just such a solitary inventor was Commander Cracketus Pot, and I am ashamed to say that because he was always dreaming of impossible inventions and adventures and explorations in the remotest parts of the earth. He was generally known in the neighborhood as Commander Crackpot. You may think that's rude, and so it is, but Commander Pot was a humorous man, and he knew his own shortcomings very well. So when he heard that this was his nickname in the neighborhood, he was not at all cross. He just roared with laughter and said, "I'll show him," and disappeared into his workshop and didn't come out for a whole day and a night. During that time, smoke came out of the workshop chimney, and there were a lot of delicious smells. And when the children put their ears to the locked door, they could hear mysterious bubblings and cooking poppings, if you know what I mean, but nothing else at all. When Commander Pot came out, he was so hungry that first of all he ate 4 fried eggs and bacon and drank a huge pot of coffee, and then he asked Mimsy to call Jeremy and Jemima, who were getting in an awful mess digging out a water's rat's hole on the bank of the lake. They never caught the water rat. He dug down faster than they did. The twins came and stood side by side, looking at their father, wondering what his invention had been this time. Commander Pot's inventions were sometimes dull things like collapsible coat hangers, sometimes useless things like edible phonograph records. That's fucking brilliant. And sometimes clever things that just wouldn't work, like cubicle potatoes, easy to slice and pack and peel, but expensive to grow each in its little iron box, and so on. Commander Pot, looking very mysterious, dug in his pockets and produced a handful of what looked like round-colored sugar candies, each a bit bigger than a marble, wrapped in paper, and still looking mysterious, he chose a red one for Jeremy and a green one for Jemima, and handed them over. Well, candies are always candies, thought the children, even though they didn't look very exciting, so they unwrapped them and were just about to pop them in their mouths when Commander Pop cried, "Wait! Look at them first, very, very carefully." The children looked at the sweets, and Commander Pot said, "What do you see? What difference about them? What's different about them?" And Jeremy and Jemima said with one voice or almost, "They've got 2 small holes drilled through the middle of them." Commander Pot nodded solemnly. "Now suck them." So Jeremy and Jemima popped the candies into their mouths and sucked busily away, looking at each other with raised eyebrows as much as to say, "What do you notice? And what do you taste?" "Mine tastes of strawberry, mine tastes of peppermint," and both pairs of eyes seemed to say, "They're just candy, round, hard candy, and our tongues can feel the holes in them. Otherwise, they're just like any other candy." But Commander Pot, who could easily see what they were thinking, suddenly held up his hand. "Now stop sucking, both of you. Twiddle the candies round with your tongues until they're held between your teeth. With the twin holes pointing outwards, open your lips and blow." Well, of course, the children laughed so much watching each other's faces that they nearly swallowed the candies. But finally, by turning their backs on each other, they managed to compose themselves and fix the candies between their teeth, and then they blew. And do you know what? A wonderful shrill whistle came out, almost like a toy steam engine. The children were so excited that they went on whistling, and the Commander Pot sternly told them to stop. He held up his hand. "Now go on sucking until I tell you to whistle again." And he took out his watch and carefully observed the minute hand. "Now?" This time, Jeremy and Jemima didn't laugh so much, but managed to get their candies, which of course were very much smaller than before, between their teeth, and they blew like crazy. This time, because their sucking had hollowed out the hole still more, the whistle was a deep one, like one of the new diesel trains going into a tunnel, and they found that they could play all sorts of tricks, like changing the tone by blocking up one hole with their tongues and half closing their lips so as to make a buzzing whistle, and lots of other variations. But then, what with their sucking and their blowing, the bit between the two holes collapsed and the candies made one last deep hoot and then crunched, as all candy does in the end, into little bits. Jeremy and Jemima both jumped up and down with excitement at Commander Pot's invention and begged for more. Then Commander Pot gave them each a little bag full of candies and told them to go out into the garden and practice every whistling tune they could think up, as after lunch he was going to take them to Scrumptious Limited. Is that what that says? Scrumptious. Scrumptious Limited, the big candy people at their local town, to give a demonstration to Lord Scrumptious, who owned the factory. And as they ran out into the garden, Commander Pot called after them, "They're called crackpots, crackpot whistling sweets. And you know what, my chicken bitties? They're going to buy us a motor car." But the children were already dancing away into the woods, making every kind of whistle you can think of, at the same time sucking like mad at their delicious candies. There really seemed to be something special about Commander Pot's invention, just a little touch of genius. Well, anyway, I can tell you this, Lord Scrumptious thought so. After he had heard Jeremy and Jemima whistling in his office, he sent them out into the factory, and they danced around among the workers, sucking and whistling and handing out candies from their pockets, so that very soon they had all the workers in the factory sucking and whistling, and everyone laughed so much that all the Scrumptious candy machines came to a stop. Lord Scrumptious had to call Jeremy and Jemima away before they brought the whole production of Scrumptious candies and chocolates to a grinding halt. So Jeremy and Jemima went back into Lord Scrumptious's grand office, and there was their father, paid £1,000 by the Scrumptious candy treasurer, and signing a paper which said he would get an additional 1 shilling on every 1,000 crackpot whistling sweets sold by Scrumptious Limited. Jeremy and Jemima didn't think that sounded very much. But when I let you into a secret and tell you that Scrumptious Limited sells 5 million every year of just one of their candies called Choco-Hoop, you can work out for yourself that perhaps, just perhaps, Commander Crackatus Pot wasn't making such a bad bargain after all. So then everyone shook hands, and Lord Scrumptious gave Jeremy and Jemima each a big free box of samples of all the candies he made. The three of them hurried off back to Mimsy to tell her the good news, and straight away the whole family hired a taxi and went to the bank to deposit the check for £1,000. And then they all went off together to buy a car. Now, I don't know if you've got into your heads yet, but the Pot family was a very conventional family. That is, they were all rather out of the ordinary. Wasn't a very conventional family. That is, they were all rather out of the ordinary. Even Mimsy must have been rather an adventurous sort of mother, or she wouldn't have married an explorer, an inventor like Commander Crackatus Pot, RN, retired, who had, as they say, no visible means of support, meaning he was someone who doesn't do regular work that brings in regular money, but depends on occasional windfalls from lucky explorations or inventions. So, when it came to buying a car, they were all determined that it shouldn't be just any car, but something a bit different from everyone else's. Not one of those black Beetle sedans that look much the same back and front, so that in the distance you don't know if it's coming or going, but something rather special, something rather adventurous. Well, they hunted all that afternoon and all the next day. They looked at brand new cars, and they visited the secondhand showroom where smart salesmen offered Commander and Mrs. Pot cigarettes and Jeremy and Jemima candies just to try and tempt them to buy. But Commander Pot knew very well all there is to know about cars, having been an engineer officer in the Navy and being an inventor as well. And one look under the hood and one trial listening carefully to the sound of the engine was generally enough for him, even if he didn't notice the speedometer had been disconnected, or that the chassis was bent because of some crash whose scratches and dents the salesman had carefully painted over. You have to be very cautious buying anything secondhand. You never know how careful the last owner has been. And anyway, whatever the thing is, if it is in good order, why does the person want to get rid of it? And then at the end of the second day, they came to a broken down little garage run by a once famous racing driver. It was really only a big tin shed with a couple of grimy gas pumps outside, and inside the concrete floor was slippery with oil, and everywhere there were bits and pieces of old cars that the garage man had been tinkering with, really, as far as one could see, just for the fun of it. But he was the sort of enthusiast Commander Pott always had a warm corner in his heart for. The two of them went on talking for a long while Mimsy and Jeremy and Jemima, who were pretty tired by then, grew more and more impatient. Suddenly, they were surprised to see Commander Pott follow the garage man round to the back of his shed, where there was a long, low object hidden under a tarpaulin. The garage man looked Commander Pott and the family, each one carefully up and down, and then he went to one end of the tarpaulin and slowly rolled it back. Well, I can't tell you how disappointed Mimsy and the children were. From the way the garage man had behaved, they thought there must be some splendid treasure of a car under the tarpaulin. But what did they see? A wreck, that's all. Just the remains, rusty and broken and bent, of a very long, low, four-seater, open motor car without a top and without the green paint, and with the green paint peeling off in strips. Well, there she is, said the garage man sadly. She once knew every racing track in Europe. In the old days, there wasn't a famous driver in Britain her at one time or another. She's still wearing England's racing green, as you can see. That was from early in the 30s. She's a 12-cylinder, 8-liter, supercharged Paragon Panther. They only made one of them, and then the firm went broke. This is the only one in the world. Doesn't look like much, does she? I'm afraid she's due for the scrap heap. Can't afford to go on giving her living space. They're coming to tow her away next week. As a matter of fact, take her to the dump, pick her up in a big grab, and drop her between one of those giant hydraulic presses. One crunch and it just squashes them into a sort of square metal biscuit. Then she'll go to a smelting works to be melted down for the raw metal. Seems a shame, doesn't it? You can almost see from her eyes, those big Marshall racing headlights, that she knows what's in store for her. But there it is. You can see the shape she's in, and it would need hundreds of pounds to get her on the road again, even supposing there was someone nowadays who could afford to run her. Commander Pott was looking curiously excited. Mind if I look her over? Go ahead, the garageman shook his head sadly. She'd appreciate a last look over by someone like you, who knows what real quality used to be. Look at that fucking dashboard. The whole family picked their way over and through the patches of oily ground. While Commander Pott looked under the hood, Mimsy and Jeremy and Jemima prodded the once beautiful soft leather upholstery. Moss flew out and looked under the carpets. Front and back beetles scuttled about and examined the knobs and switches and dials on the dashboard. There were dozens of them, all rusty and mildewed, and tried the big old boa constrictor horn that worked with the India rubber bulb. But nothing happened except that a lot of dust blew out of the end into Commander Pott's face as he bent over the engine, peering and tinkering. The children looked at Mimsy, and Mimsy looked back at them. And do you know what? They didn't just dolefully shake their heads at each other. They all had the same look in their eyes. The look said, this must once have been the most beautiful car in the world. If the engine's more or less all right, and if we all set to and scrubbed and painted and mended and polished, do you suppose we could put her back as she used to be? It wouldn't be like having just one of those black beetles that the factories turn out in hundreds and thousands that all look alike. We'd have a real jewel of a car, something to love and cherish and look after, as if it were one of the family. Commander Pott took his face out from under the hood. He looked at them, and they looked back at him, and he just turned to the garageman and said, I'll buy her. We all love her, and we'll make her as good as new. How much do you want for her? 50 pounds, said the garageman. She wouldn't fetch much as scrap. Commander Pott counted out the notes there and then and said, "Thank you. And will you please have her towed along to my workshop just as soon as you can?" And do you know, there was almost tears of happiness in the garage man's eyes as he shook them all by the hand. As they climbed into their taxi to go off home, he said seriously, "Commander Pott, Mrs. Pott, Master Pott, and Miss Pott, you will never regret buying that car. She's going to give you the time of your lives. You've saved her from the scrap heap, and I'll eat my hat if I had a hat to eat if she doesn't repay you for what you've done today." He was still waving happily after them when they drove out of sight. As they bowled along in their taxi, Jemima whispered to Jeremy in the front seat next to the driver, "Jeremy, did you notice something very mysterious about the old license plate that was hanging from the back of our car?" "There was nothing mysterious about it," said Jeremy scornfully. "It was Gen 11. "Yes," said Jemima excitedly, "Gen 11. Don't you realize what that spells? Genie. Like magical people, sort of spirits. Like that story about the bottle imp by Robert Louis Stevenson and Mimsy read to us once." "Hum," said Jeremy thoughtfully. "Hum, hum, hum." And they sat silently thinking this odd coincidence over and over until they got home. And that will be the end of the first part there, bruv. Goodbye.